Data on hundreds of studies by Wuhan's virology lab have reportedly been wiped. The news comes just before health experts from the World Health Organization are set to visit China to investigate the origins of the virus. Chinese authorities recall thousands of bottles of baby lotion. That's after parents found the cream causes growth defects and other health problems. Some Chinese dissidents say they are worried about big tech's silencing of dissents. According to them, it could fuel a movement similar to China's Cultural Revolution. And the Chinese Communist Party is reportedly paying a handful of British YouTubers. That's so they'll promote the regime's use of re-education camps, where ethnic minorities are detained. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. First, an update on the pandemic situation in China. 20,000 people in Shijiazhuang City in Hebei province were moved elsewhere to quarantine on Monday. These people came from a dozen villages in Hebei province's Gaochun district. It's the only district in China officially labeled as posing the highest possible infection risk. Many Shijiazhuang residents complain online about rising food prices, which they say doubled in recent months. But authorities claim prices are stable and unchanged. One netizen expressed his complaints online via Chinese social media platform Weibo. He said, quote, "If the relevant department in Shijiazhuang sees my post, please don't call me to threaten me. I am telling the truth and it's not a rumor. As a citizen, I have the right to say it." Shijiazhuang city government has been reporting dozens of new virus cases every day. But local Ms. Wang, who works for the city's Epidemic Prevention and Control Department, told Radio Free Asia that actually more than 100 new cases are found daily. She also revealed that the situation in one of Shijiazhuang's neighboring cities, Nangong City, remains serious. In some cases, entire villages were moved elsewhere for quarantine. But because of the Chinese regime's strict censorship, even insiders can't access the details. Now we look to new information on China's suspected virus cover-up. Concerns are rising that China is trying to hide the origin of the CCP, or Chinese Communist Party virus. One of the country's top science agencies has wiped hundreds of pages of information about studies published by a Wuhan lab. Many of the studies researched diseases that spread from animals to humans. That's according to UK media outlet The Daily Mail. The lab that conducted the studies has been at the center of controversy. It's called the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The lab is known to study dangerous pathogens. Some even suspect the CCP virus leaked from the facility. Some are drawing attention to the timing of the data wipe. It comes after China tried to block health experts from the World Health Organization from entering the country. Last week, after reaching agreement with China, the WHO sent a group of health experts to investigate the origin of the virus. But after two experts left for Wuhan, they learned that Chinese officials hadn't approved their entry. The director of the WHO was reportedly not pleased to hear the news. China has since approved the entry, and experts are set to arrive this Thursday. Now we take a look at the after effects of the CCP virus. According to one Chinese study, 3/4 of people who were hospitalized due to the CCP virus are now suffering from various after effects. The study was conducted 6 months after the patients left the hospital. The study involved more than 1,700 patients. They were discharged from a Wuhan hospital between January and May of last year. About 70% of them needed oxygen during the treatment. Reported after effects include impaired lung or kidney function, fatigue, muscle weakness, disturbed sleep patterns, and depression. Another study from South Korea published in September shows some patients still suffer from loss of taste or smell even after their recovery. A California-based immigrant is exposing the brutality of state-run hospitals in China. He says physicians forcibly remove organs from Falun Gong practitioners while they're still alive and without injecting anesthetic. NTD's Becky Zhou has the story.
The illegal organ trade is a billion-dollar business that's due to its low supply and high demand. The book Bloody Harvest was written by former Canadian Member of Parliament David Kilgour. It says a healthy heart is worth $130,000 in China. A pair of lungs sells for 20,000 more. It explains that the Chinese Communist Party has been persecuting Falun Gong practitioners since 1999. California-based whistleblower Lu Shuhong is one of the few people who uses his real name to expose organ harvesting. Lu told U.S.-based radio network Sound of Hope about how the issue came to his attention at a family gathering in 2002. One of his relatives, a former government official in Shanghai, asked Lu if any of his American friends needed organ transplants.
He, Mao Shuping, asked me to keep an eye on this. He said if I could get in touch with anyone who needed an organ transplant, I could make lots of money, much more than doing renovations. He then went on to talk about organs like kidneys, livers, and corneas.
Lu's relative Mao Shuping was in charge of labor camps in Shanghai's Justice Department. Lu was subject to retaliation after giving an interview in 2016. A U.S.-based investigative group waited 4 years to publish the report in order to protect his safety.
Authorities in Shanghai arrested Falun Gong practitioners without keeping a record in 2016, then sent them somewhere directly. The nationwide genocide launched by the CCP is still going on today. They are crazy killers driven by huge profit.
After a nearly 20-year investigation, the group published thousands of data points and audio recordings to expose the persecution. Mao's wife Zhou Qing worked as the president of Shanghai Wanping Hospital. Lu says she told him she had removed organs from live Falun Gong practitioners on multiple occasions, and that sometimes she didn't inject anesthetics. Lu said that according to her, the less anesthetic that was used, the fresher and better the organs would be, and that she stopped performing the procedures after she started having nightmares. Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, is a spiritual meditation practice that follows the Buddhist tradition. It consists of moral teachings and slow-moving meditative exercises. Reporting by Becky Zhou, NTD News.
And an investigator that exposed China's practice of forced organ harvesting is receiving a human rights award for his work. David Matas is a Canadian lawyer and human rights defender. He is known to Falun Gong practitioners, the Uyghurs, and other oppressed groups in China for his battle against the regime's human rights violations, and especially for his courageous investigations into forced organ harvesting. Matas is now the first to receive the award Global Humanitarian Leader of the Year. This is an award by the human rights group called Canadians in Support of Refugees in Dire Need. Matas co-founded the International Coalition to End Transplant Abuse in China, a non-profit that consists of lawyers, medical professionals, and human rights advocates. In 2010, Matas and former Canadian Secretary of State David Kilgour were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. This is thanks to their investigation into the CCP's persecution and forced organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. Another product scandal is plaguing Chinese consumers, this time featuring a poisonous baby lotion. Reports say the cream causes growth defects and other health problems when applied. NTD's Don Ma has the details.
Chinese health authorities are recalling 1,200 bottles of baby lotion. That's after claims that it's causing serious deformities and other health issues. Developed by a company in China's Fujian province, the product is marketed as an antibacterial skin cream for infants. But parents who used it on their babies soon started noticing unusual swelling, weight gain, stunted growth, and excessive body hair on their children. The conditions are allegedly caused by hormones in the cream. The scandal came to light after popular Chinese consumer rights advocate Wei Wenfeng shared footage of the deformities on one 5-month-old baby girl on Chinese social media. The baby's mother started applying the skin cream 2 months ago.
2个月没有长身高，就每个月都在胖，1个月大概胖3斤。之后额头嘛，汗毛就开始长，又黑又密，很长。发现他身上各处都开始长汗毛，脸就是摸上去硬硬的，就像块大石头一样，就戳不动那个。我们天天给宝宝用的是毒药。
Doctors told her to stop using the harmful cream, but warned that the baby may experience withdrawal symptoms.
他说这个激素一停，有可能宝宝会身体不适，会造成全身衰竭，因为太胖了，然后他脖子又短，呼吸系统没有发育完全，随时都有可能一口气喘不上来就死亡。
Doctors say the lotion may cause the girl to go through puberty early and that it would take years for the facial hair to come off naturally. They say extended use of the cream may cause osteoporosis, kidney stones, and cessation of growth. Wei later found shocking results after subjecting the product to a lab test. It showed that the cream contained of up to 31 milligrams per kilogram of harmful hormones. Wei says Chinese regulators don't allow these types of additives. After further investigation, he found stores carrying the baby lotion all recommended the product over the others for sale. This was very suspicious to him.
我们调查组随机选了3家母婴店进行暗访，发现每一家都售卖了这个问题婴儿霜，并且都摆在货架最显眼的位置。只要顾客提到孩子皮肤红这样的情况，店员就会直接推荐这款婴儿霜。当我们表达想要别的产品时，
还有其他的吗？就这种好像最好的，俺家卖这个就够了，聪明来太多了。
这个婴儿霜竟然有一种垄断母婴店的趋势，不知道这背后隐藏的是不是巨大的利益。
The baby's mother tried to warn the others about the cream on social media last week, but to her surprise, the product's manufacturer threatened to sue her instead. The company demanded that she stop slandering the product and claimed that the cream contained no hormonal ingredients. Chinese authorities reported that the manufacturer has suspended production, but didn't mention compensation for affected families. This scandal isn't an isolated case. In recent years, around 6 different baby lotions were found to contain harmful hormones. Some of them even contained extremely potent ones. In 2018, China's Jiangsu television reported a month-and-a-half-old baby girl started suffering from high blood sugar, developed kidney stones, and her face became swollen. That's after her parents used a particular skin cream on her skin. Through analysis, it was later found that the cream contained super potent hormones. Don Mon reporting, NTD News.
U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer is urging the incoming Biden administration to keep tariffs on China. He told the Wall Street Journal in an interview on Monday. Lighthizer credits President Trump for holding Beijing accountable for its unfair trade practices. The Trump administration has imposed tariffs on $370 billion worth of Chinese goods. It cites China's theft of U.S. intellectual property, forced technology transfers, unfair subsidies to Chinese firms, and restrictive access to Chinese markets as the reason. Other moves include delisting Chinese telecom companies from the New York Stock Exchange and blacklisting some Chinese companies. It blacklisted China's largest computer chip maker, Huawei. President Trump also banned transactions with a number of Chinese apps. Lighthizer says because of these policies, the Trump administration transformed the way people think about trade with China. Some Chinese dissidents say they are worried about big tech's silencing of dissents. They say overemphasizing political correctness might develop into a movement similar to China's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s and 70s. Others say drawing parallels between America's democratic society and communist China is far-fetched and unwarranted. To understand the debate, we need to first look at what the Cultural Revolution in China actually involved. Chinese scholar Ceng Xiaonong previously summarized the 4 social backgrounds of the revolution.
The first is the lack of freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and freedom of movement under the Communist Party's totalitarian system. The second is the extreme personal worship of former CCP leader Mao Zedong. The third is to mobilize every single person in society to get involved in political campaigns. The fourth is that ideological correctness became the only criterion for judging everyone's words and actions.
In China, the suppression of freedom of speech reached a peak during the Cultural Revolution. What replaced the free press is what's called a big character poster. Posted by the Communist Party's Red Guards, the posters often contain vicious words condemning individuals who disagree with the CCP. The content is often politically judgmental instead of logical or based on factual evidence. Those who are targeted have their words cut out of context, which are used to label them. Later in the movement, the posters essentially served as warrants for arrests and home searches. During the Cultural Revolution, any criticism of Mao was deemed anti-revolutionary, and all aspects of society were linked to political struggles. Then there's the communist doctrine of ideological correctness above everything. Under most free societies, people are innocent until proven guilty. There has to be either preponderance of the evidence, clear and convincing evidence, and/or evidence beyond a reasonable doubt before someone is convicted. Under the CCP's jurisdiction, due process was replaced by so-called struggle sessions, a phenomena that reached its peak during the Cultural Revolution. The targets of such sessions are those deemed oppressors of the poor and powerless. They would be subjected to public humiliation and verbal and physical assault until they are forced to confess their sins, condemn themselves, and beg for mercy. The U.S. ambassador in the Netherlands hosts Taiwan's representative at the U.S. Embassy. It's the first publicly announced visit to a U.S. government office since the Secretary of State lifted restrictions on interactions last Saturday. U.S. Ambassador to the Netherlands Piet Hoekstra posted photos on Twitter of his meeting with a Taiwan representative. Like most countries, the United States has no embassy in Taiwan. Officials from both sides have previously met in non-official venues such as hotels. Beijing has condemned the move by the U.S., saying nobody could prevent China's reunification. The communist regime views the self-governed democratic island as its own territory and opposes Taiwan having state-to-state ties. The Chinese regime is funding some British YouTubers to produce pro-Beijing propaganda videos. The Times newspaper reveals that a father and son duo, Li and Ollie Barrett, is praising the re-education camps in Xinjiang and repeating Communist Party propaganda. Ollie Barrett even says the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong are Western media brainwashing. The Times says some of their videos were funded by Chinese Radio International, a government media organization. Analysis by the University of Oxford shows that their videos are tweeted by members of China's Communist Party, including a government minister. Li admitted in at least one video, now removed, that they attended a propaganda session in China where they live. Now we turn to an update on nations friendly with the Chinese Communist regime. First, North Korea. Chinese Communist Party head Xi Jinping recently congratulated North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on his election win. That's according to Chinese state media reports on Monday. Kim was appointed as General Secretary of the ruling Workers' Party on Sunday, taking over the title from his late father. China is North Korea's largest trade partner and closest ally. North Korean state media said Xi expressed his goodwill to ensure regional stability and prosperity and to strengthen relations between them. Kim Jong-un called Washington Pyongyang's main enemy, saying the United States can improve relations with North Korea only by abandoning what he called its hostile intentions. He added he would adjust his policy based on the incoming Biden administration, quote, responding to force with force and to goodwill with goodwill, noting he would boost the country's nuclear power as leverage over Biden. President Trump met with Kim Jong-un 3 times during his administration. On one occasion, Kim invited President Trump to cross over the military demarcation line between North and South Korea to enter the territory of North Korea. And in other news, Iran is also ramping up pressure on the incoming Biden administration. Iran just marked the 1-year anniversary of the U.S. airstrike that killed General Soleimani, leader of its Revolutionary Guard Corps. The Iranian regime has vowed to never forget the strike and to seek revenge on the U.S. The Iranian regime seized a South Korean oil tanker in the Persian Gulf last Monday. South Korea is an important U.S. ally. The regime then announced the approval of a 20% boost in uranium refinement. This will take the regime one step closer to the 90% purity needed to make nuclear weapons. The move violates the nuclear deal former President Obama signed with Iran back in 2015. President Trump withdrew from the deal after taking office. He sought to punish the Iranian regime by piling on more sanctions. Addressing the uranium decision, Iran's foreign minister says the decision is reversible if other countries comply with a nuclear deal. All of these recent behaviors may indicate that Iran is taking a new approach to foreign policy. Now that a new U.S. administration is set to take office January 20th, it may be hoping that by ramping up pressure, the new Biden administration will adopt a policy of appeasement and comply with its demands. Both Iran and North Korea are partners with Communist China. The Chinese regime and the Iranian regime are in a 25-year strategic partnership in trade, politics, culture, and security. While Iran and North Korea have ramped up pressure on the U.S. since Congress certified Joe Biden as president-elect. The U.S. is placing sanctions on an Iran-based leader of Al-Qa'ida. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying Iran is now the world's largest sponsor of terrorism.
The U.S. has successfully reduced its military presence in Afghanistan, but Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says now the country must shift its attention to Iran.
Iran decided to allow Al-Qa'ida to establish a new operational headquarters. I would say Iran is indeed the new Afghanistan as the key geographic hub for Al-Qa'ida. But it's actually worse. Unlike in Afghanistan, when Al-Qa'ida was hiding in the mountains, Al-Qa'ida today is operating underneath the hard shell of the Iranian regime's protection. America has far less visibility on Al-Qa'ida's capabilities.
Saying the terrorist group's presence in Iran could lead to another form of blackmail to coax the U.S. into another nuclear deal. In response, Pompeo is placing sanctions on this Iran-based Al-Qa'ida leader.
We can't ignore this truth. And just as we have done with other horrible regimes like the one in China, the Trump administrations will look to this as it is, not as we wish it to be. We see the true nature of the Iranian regime and we refuse to indulge it.
Saying the U.S. cannot be under the impression that Iran is a neutral country, calling on the press to take their job more seriously while reporting on international affairs and terrorism threats.
And that a free press is a staple of a healthy democracy. More speech is important, and I can't say that I always agree with everything that's written, but what you write is read, and it matters. Get it right, get the truth, and America will prosper.
Pompeo gave a specific example of a misleading detail in a New York Times report about an Al-Qa'ida member who died last August.
The Times wrote, quote, that he had been living in Iran was surprising, given that Iran and Al-Qa'ida are bitter enemies, end of quote. It could not be more wrong. It wasn't surprising at all. And more importantly, they're not enemies. Al-Masri's presence inside Iran points to the reason that we're here today.
Downplaying the relationship between Iran and Al-Qa'ida is detrimental, he says, because the U.S. needs to acknowledge the truth of the threat, confront it, and defeat it. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Now to another communist friend of the CCP, Cuba. The Trump administration has redesignated Cuba as a state censor of terrorism and will impose new sanctions in the coming days. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said Cuba was being blacklisted for repeatedly providing support for acts of international terrorism by harboring U.S. fugitives and Colombian rebel leaders. Pompeo also mentioned Cuba's security support for Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Pompeo said in a statement, "With this action, we will once again hold Cuba's government accountable and send a clear message. The Castro regime must end its support for international terrorism and subversion of U.S. justice." The terrorism designation carries a prohibition on U.S. economic and a ban on U.S. arms exports, among other restrictions. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow. Hi, we're happy to announce that you can also catch us on cable TV now. Millions of households already choose us as one of their trusted news sources, and you can too. You can watch us in Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York, and many other cities as well. And if your system doesn't carry NTD yet, you can just give them a quick call and request NTD on your cable provider. Thank you for watching. See you next time.